Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in Discover Your Potential segment brought to you by The Wellness Way, we're joined by our regular contributor, podcaster, and author, Dan Gilman. Today, he's joined by Darren Hood, a seasoned user experience professional and educator. He designed his first website back in 1995 and now possesses almost 3 decades of experience, including work for the Fortune 50 and some of the largest digital design agencies in the world. He's skilled in various UX disciplines, including heuristics and usability, information architecture, interaction design, UX research, and interface design. With an additional passion for education, he also serves as an adjunct professor for Kent State's UX Design Master's Program, UCLA, Michigan State, and Lawrence Tech Universities. He's also the host of the World of UX podcast. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly is user experience? Well, I'm going to let our expert tell us. So welcoming now to the show is Dan Gilman and Darren Hood chatting about UX and where the field is headed. Welcome to the show, superstars.
Hello.
Hi, Zen.
Hi, Zen. How are you?
I'm
Thanks for
doing
having me.
great. I'm doing great, Darren. Okay, so let's dive right in. So, for our listeners who might not be as familiar, could you start by explaining what UX and UX design is and why it's so crucial?
Sure thing. UX, I like to think of it as a moniker. It's really an umbrella term or acronym that's, I like to describe it as being representative of a multitude of methods, methodologies, techniques, and deliverables, all of which picture them being in a toolbox. And the person who is a UX professional will then access that toolbox based on whatever the needs are, based on whatever the goals are, selecting the different tool to help achieve a particular goal. So there's a whole ton of things to learn. It's a very large world, and it's very critical to business because, for example, back in about 2015, 2016 or so, Design Management Institute stated that user-centered companies outperform the competition according to Standard & Poor's by up to 228%. So when a company embraces UX of a truth, applies it of a truth, has the right people in place of a truth, it actually generates, it fosters tremendous competitive advantage in the business world. So the haves succeed, the have-nots, nice being here, have some wonderful gifts and fabulous prizes, but they don't they don't come
Yeah.
out on top.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And according to Statista, there are nearly 5.3 billion internet users worldwide, and by the year 2029, and 2029 is just around the corner, that number is expected to reach close to 8 billion. So, an appealing user experience and design is essential for a successful website or mobile app to build that trustworthy and positive first interaction, because you lose them after that, and retain the user's interest. In fact, a recent Google study reported that if a mobile site takes more than 3 seconds to load, 53% of visitors are likely to leave. And on the aesthetic design side, a Stanford University study found that 94% of first impressions of a website are related to its design. So these first impressions mean everything, and they're going to directly impact overall satisfaction and conversion rates. Now, I know Dan has some questions as well, so I'll hand it off to him.
Yeah, before becoming a podcast host, I dedicated myself to studying design and user experience, and I truly believe this would be a lifelong work because UX really helps make our lives seamless. But given these aspirations, I'm quite concerned about the current state of UX. But Darren, could you share your insights on the state of user experience based on your own experience?
I started in 95. It wasn't called UX back then. And we were mostly information architects, interaction designers. But I just fell in love with it. Initially, I abandoned my initial plans to go the route of education only. And I just continued to grow in the discipline, gradually going from doing it part-time during the day to full-time during the day. And then eventually I ended up getting 2 UX-related master's degrees because I just love education. But I after getting my second master's in 2015 and thinking like you, this is going to be a great long-term prospectus.
Mhm.
What I have found is in 2011, there was actually no misinformation spreading in UX prior to 2011. We experienced what we refer to as the gold rush, where you have all these people who find out how much it's paying, they want to get into it. Companies decide, hey, we need to have UX people, but they didn't really get educated about UX. So they were like creating UX departments, putting people in place, but not really doing it from an informed perspective. So you have the boot camps came along in 2011 also, and which just really just exponentially increased the misdirection and the misinformation. Fast forward to 2024, and so one other reference to 2011. Back in 2011, I said, and I started to tell people that UX was under siege, that
Mhm.
all that stuff that was happening was starting to morph the discipline into something that it was not. So now we come to 2024. That siege has actually succeeded. UX has been redefined. The companies that never got educated on UX have increased exponentially, continuously putting people who don't know what UX is in charge of their operations. And long story short, now it's really upside down. So you do right to be concerned about the current state. You can actually do UX work now and be disavowed. You can make recommendations that are proper and be ignored. The experienced UX professional is now being cast aside in favor of the person that's doing what we refer to as UX theater, where people like to act like they know what they're doing, but they really don't. So we have the, as we like to jokingly say, butts in seats, but there's not really the value prop. It's not there. So you have people going through the motions, and they're not getting things done. And the things that our host mentioned, that you have 3 seconds on a mobile app to accomplish X, you have X amount of time to do Z, Y, and Z. These things aren't being done.
Right. And
And
what's interesting is going into Web3, all the smoking mirrors of all these all the charlatans, if you will, that claim to be
uh,
professionals, that's going to unravel very quickly because going into Web3, not only do you need to understand that model and really kind of take that UX experience to that next level, but this is where experience will really come into play. So
mhm.
shifting gears to education and pursuing a path in the UX field. Okay, so let's talk. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many major tech companies grew their workforces, and UX really blew up as a viable and well paying career path, as you alluded to earlier. But there have been since some layoffs in recent years, and the US Bureau of Labor Statistics revealed that jobs for UI and UX designers is still expected to grow 23% from 2021 to 2031. Not as much as we would have loved to see this growth, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the current educational paths into UX. Are they sufficient? And what does this mean for Web3?
The interesting thing about the educational paths, I found just a standard calculation that there's approximately 6,500 institutions of higher learning, and there are programs for UX in less than 2% of them. The educational world has yet to catch up with what's going on with UX. The educational world, academia, I should say, has not really caught up very well. And in addition to not having many programs, a lot of the programs that do exist are not structured well. They have really bad pedagogies. They have really bad andragogies. They're scratching the surface on subjects. They don't have skilled people who are committed to education delivering. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge in the educational world. So that, and people coming in, they don't know what to do, and they're following the Pied Piper, if you will, and just going after whatever the masses are going for, and the masses are not going to the universities. So it's pretty interesting, and people would do well to try to latch on to some informed resources, but that's a difficult goal too, because the most misinformed people are the loudest.
Oh, always, always, always.
Yeah, with that said, Darren, too, what advice would you give to those looking to start a career in UX design or UX today in general today?
Yeah, if people are looking to get involved in UX, you can connect with communities. There are a lot of communities. The UXPA, the
Mhm.
UX Professional Association, is probably the most prominent and the one that's going to give the most information that's going to help direct someone's path. when you look at education, you have very few of the undergrad UX programs that are available, and most of them that are only available brick and mortar. So if you don't have that where you live, then you're going to have to find another avenue. When it comes to graduate studies, there are a few more, not many though, again, less than 2% overall. You can do some searches. When I was trying to get a degree, I went to UX News and World Report and was able to find top programs easily. Now that helps you to skim through all the muck and the mire and cut through the bush, if you will, of getting to where you can at least have some institutions to evaluate to
Right.
see ones might best suit you. I personally say no to boot camps, period. There are a scant few that try to do it right, but to me, the boot camp bit was a great idea that was never really executed properly. And so now people go to boot camps, they get infected with Dunning-Kruger. The hubris that comes out of those is off the charts. They only understand things from the surface perspective, and yet they're being told that they're going to be guaranteed jobs, which nobody can do. They're being told they can learn everything about UX in 6 months, 9 months. I've been doing this now for almost 30 years, and it's a commitment to lifelong learning. So there is no arrival.
Right.
You just keep growing. So connect with different communities, look at some of the different options that are out there, but most importantly, try to learn, check and see if you're actually made up for this. If you have the personal character that matches what
You have to love it. You have to be passionate about this.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let's chat about artificial intelligence. So AI
Mhm.
is expected to continue growing at significant rates, and
Mhm.
many are pushing for early adoption in various industries, and others are quite fearful of it. So how do you see emerging technologies like AI and virtual reality changing the UX landscape?
The one thing I love about UX is that pure UX, because there's pure UX and there's what I call the cult of UX. In pure UX, we're geared to pivot. The fundamentals that apply to this discipline are very pervasive. So once you apply something to the website, you can actually apply it to mobile phone. You just need to learn the form factor. That same thing is going to apply to AI. That same thing is going to apply to virtual reality. So AI, it's going to grow. The error rates are way too high now for it to be dependable. Up to 85%, I've heard. 85%, that's ridiculous. A lot of plagiarism. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, it's artificial intelligence. I see that as an oxymoron. Actually, it's artificial. It's not real intelligence. It's AI is limited to finite science, where UX is actually an infinite science. We have to pivot. There's too many things that shake and move, and we have to sort of morph with it in order to deliver what we deliver. So the virtual reality, AI, these are areas we're going to have to continue growing in. Technically, they're not new. They're just something that people are very hyped about. So we need to do the same thing we did when the iPhone came along, understand how our principles that we're applying in the existing form factors and experiences apply to that and go forward. And the people who don't know the fundamentals need to get on board because, as was said, when Web3 comes along, those people who've been playing UX theater and playing games and subscribing to the fake it till you make it mentality, they're
Yep.
going to get exposed, and then people like me will be welcomed back into the workplace because today it's quite tough.
Amen.
Yeah. I just love this conversation. How do those challenges like impact the overall quality of digital products from your experience? You
The
kind of touched
challenge,
upon that.
yeah, I mean, it's simply a matter of understanding users, something else a lot of people have become averse to. They just want to do design thinking, come in, bring stakeholders in. The users get left out of that
Yeah.
a lot of the time. So you don't understand their mental models. You don't understand what they need. You don't understand what they want. You don't understand their pain points. And so the challenges don't get addressed because it becomes a thing where a bunch of people get in the room. We call it genius design. I know my users. I don't need to do any of that. And so they just throw something together that's really chock full of biases.
Right.
And biases are not going to meet needs. Biases are not going to answer questions. Biases are not going to help you maintain a competitive advantage. And eventually, slowly, people will trickle away. Look at what happened to Netflix And with Blockbuster, Blockbuster failed to keep their eye on the pulse of their customer. And that failure to recognize, now you've got people entering and disrupting, and you need to understand what's going on, how that can impact the mental models of your customer base, and respond. And by keeping those little walk in and rent your video places open, well, everybody knows how that story ended and where we are today.
And with that, we are out of time. It is clear as day that not only do you love what you do, but you love talking about what you do, and that's great. Makes you quite the expert on the microphone, very fitting for this particular segment. I thank you so much for coming on and giving us not only just your take on things, but being as transparent as you were.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That was Discover Your Potential segment, brought to you by The Wellness Way. That was the incredible Darren Hood, seasoned user experience professional and educator. Do check out his podcast at worldous.com. And of course, to see more of Dan, you could head to discoveryourpotentialshow.com. Check Darren out on the gram at Uncensored, and you can head directly to their website at worldous.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by The Wellness Way, your trusted partner in health restoration. Now you can feel amazing at any age with their foundational testing and mind-body approach. The Wellness Way offers in-clinic and telehealth support when you're ready to test, not guess, what your body needs. Discover your best health by visiting their website, thewellnessway.com, and selecting a clinic near you. Do health differently at thewellnessway.com.